hello to everybody who's joining us, whether you're from North Carolina or beyond. I was very much looking forward to my trip to Asheville. I've been once before. I absolutely love it. You guys have the best restaurants, the best sort of coolest vibe, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to Asheville, and I hope to do that next June. So tonight we're going to talk about my novel, Troubles in Paradise, and I'm going to start by saying it is a book 3. So one of the things I started doing 7 years ago is I took on a side hustle, and my side hustle was writing winter books. And the way this started was that in the summer of 2013, my editor called and said, "We've had a title fall off our holiday list. Can you write a Christmas book in 4 weeks?" And I was writing my novel, The Matchmaker, at that point, which was it was emotionally absorbing and I didn't want to stop. So I said, you know what, I can't write a Christmas book in 4 weeks, but when I'm finished with The Matchmaker, I will write a Christmas book for next year. So I came up with an idea about a family named the Quinns who own an inn on Winter Street in Nantucket, and the novel was called Winter Street. And my publisher said, great, only my vision included a trilogy, 3 books. And my publisher said, oh, we only want 1 book. So I wrote Winter Street and intentionally gave it no ending. And then voila, a contract for 2 more books appeared, Winter Stroll and Winter Storms. And then ironically, my editor called in the summer of 2016 and said, what do I have to do to get you to write a 4th book in the Winter Street trilogy, write a series? And I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to write a 4th book. I felt like I had put the trilogy to bed after book 3. But what I did want to do is I wanted to write a trilogy that was set down in St. John. And so I used that as a bargaining chip. And I said, I will write a 4th Winter Street book if you allow me to give a shot at writing a trilogy set in the Caribbean. And they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. They thought they didn't want me to leave Nantucket. They didn't think it would sell. They were concerned about me switching venue, but they really wanted the 4th Winter Street book. So they said, okay, go ahead and give it a shot. And what ended up happening is I began writing the Paradise series, which is set in St. John. And I am thrilled and gratified to say that the Paradise series has far outsold the Winter Street series, is much more popular and is on track at this point to match, if not exceed, the popularity of my summer books. So the Paradise series has really taken off. And this is why I wanted to write it. In 2012, I went down to St. John to do a writing retreat because I needed some time away. My kids were at ages where they required a lot of me, and I needed to get away for 5 weeks to really focus on my writing. So I took 5 weeks in St. John in 2012, and it worked out so well that I did it every year, and I have gone every single year to St. John for 5 weeks in March/April since 2012. So I've done it for 8 or 9 years now. And I even went back right after in 2018, which was right after the devastating hurricanes of the fall of 2017. So I have not missed a single year. I fell in love with St. John because it reminds me so much of Nantucket, except that it's tropical. So the 2 islands have a lot in common. There are no chain stores. There are no stoplights. 70% of Nantucket is held in conservation, and 65% of the Virgin Islands is held by the national parks. So there's a lot of open land. It has a very rustic feel. Nantucket has 1 town called Town, and then it has a little village out on the east end called Sconset. And St. John has 1 town called Cruise Bay, and then a little village out on the east end called Coral Bay. And so they're both 105 square miles. So they're exactly the same size. Now, St. John is volcanic, so it's incredibly hilly, whereas Nantucket is very flat and the highest point is 108 feet. So they differ in that respect, but they were so alike, and I fell so in love with St. John, and I thought what I really want to do is write about it as a second home. So I wrote a novel, the first novel called Winter in Paradise, about a woman named Irene Steele. Irene is 57 years old. And on New Year's Day, she gets a call saying that her husband has been killed in a helicopter crash in the Virgin Islands. Well, it turns out Irene didn't even know her husband was in the Virgin Islands or what he would be doing there. So this mystery unfolds, and it turns out, she goes down and it turns out that he has a second life, a second family she knew nothing about. And her 2 grown sons go down to the Virgin Islands with her. And what surprises them is how quickly they fall in love with the island. They are dealing with their grief and their confusion and their anger, but they meet people that they connect with down in the Virgin Islands. And then that brings us to book 2, when all 3 of them move down to the Virgin Islands. And that novel is called What Happens in Paradise. And I won't give away any more spoilers, but suffice it to say, Troubles in Paradise is the 3rd book in the trilogy. So all of the mysteries that have been building up between books 1 and book 2 are answered in Troubles in Paradise. But I do not want you to buy Troubles in Paradise unless you have the other 2 books. So that is my only request.
Well, that request makes perfect sense. And it's interesting because the first couple of questions that we had, one was like, I have Troubles in Paradise, but I haven't read it yet. Will there be spoilers? So, and I just typed back to the person, no spoilers. And then also someone looking to, get a previous book. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Just back up if you need to, and really get into it. We do have audience questions coming in, and I encourage you to send in more questions. Before we get to the audience questions, I wanted to touch on a couple things with you. One is, because talking to as many authors as we do, we get to learn a little bit more about not just writing and the craft of writing, and I have a couple of those questions as well, but there's a business of writing as well. And when you get to the point where you are selling lots of books everywhere, that's a consideration. Going on tour, getting a sense of what your fans want, that sort of thing. And so I was really struck by what you said about, leaving the cliffhanger at the end of the first winter book, knowing that they were not super excited about having you write more winter books, right? And that being a savvy choice, and making those kinds of choices actually being part of having this as the thing that you do, right? And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about where you've been and how you've gotten to where you are in terms of being a writer as a profession.
Yes. So I'm going to back up and say that I always wanted to be a writer. When I was in 2nd grade, my 2nd grade teacher gave everyone in the class an award at the end of the year, and my award was the top author award. And I can remember being 7 and hearing my teacher say it and feeling a recognition. I thought to myself, that's right, I am an author. And I have had the privilege of having that 2nd grade teacher. Last year when Summer of '69 came out, she came to the event and I put her in the front row and was able to thank her, because I don't know that I showed any special talent at 7, but she most certainly set me on my path. And I'm very, very grateful to her for recognizing whatever interest I had in writing. She really nurtured it. I went to Johns Hopkins University undergrad, and they, believe it or not, have a dedicated creative writing major called writing seminars. And that was my major in college, which was wonderful because everyone else was a biomedical engineer and pre-med. And so my classes were so much easier that my job was like to go save seats at the bar for the evening, because I was always done studying first. And then after I graduated from Johns Hopkins, I went to my professor, whose name was Madison Smart Bell. He was my writing professor. And I said to him, I want to be a writer. What do I do? And he told me, you need to go out in the world and live. You need to have some experiences. And so I moved to New York City. I worked in publishing for 9 torturous months. And I absolutely hated it. I knew I wanted to be a writer. And for some reason I thought working in publishing was the way to make that happen. No. So I quit and I got a job teaching English in the New York City public schools. And then I got a better job teaching up in Westchester County, north of Manhattan. And I had the summer between those two teaching years off. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to go away for the summer. So my family had always gone to Cape Cod in the summer, and I had been to the Vineyard in college. And so I decided I'm going to go to Nantucket. So Nantucket is an island 30 miles off the coast of Cape Cod. And I got a room in a house and spent the summer there and fell madly in love with the place and decided that I was going to move permanently to Nantucket. So after my second year teaching, I moved to Nantucket permanently. And in the off season, so I would work during the summer season, and then in the off seasons, I would travel. And I went to Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. You know, I did a big, long backpacking trip. And then I went back to Nantucket. And then the second year, I went to South America, the Galapagos, Costa Rica. And after that, I felt like I had sufficiently lived. And I applied to graduate school, and I ended up at the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. And many of you probably know Iowa is like the best of the best as far as writing schools go. It's very literary. I got there. I absolutely hated it. I hated it. I was miserable. I would cry. The university gave free therapy. I would go to therapy every week and cry and tell them how miserable I was. I missed my friends. I was married at the time. I missed my husband. I missed Nantucket. I missed the water. I missed the restaurants. I missed the sort of the East Coast culture because I was stuck, you know, what I perceived to be like the pig farms and the silos and the cornfields. And I was miserable. And I realized at some point that my best therapy was going to be writing a novel about Nantucket. And so I started writing my first novel, The Beach Club. In my very last workshop at Iowa, my professor had his agent to the class. And the agent said, "Which one of you lives on Nantucket?" And I said, "Oh, that's me." And he said, "Well, would you stay after class?" I have Mike Pence's fly in here, sorry. And would you stay after class? And I didn't even want to because I had my U-Haul packed. I was ready to leave. But thank goodness I did, because Michael Carlisle has been my agent now for 20 years. He took me on out of that class in Iowa. I sent him The Beach Club 9 months later when I finished it. And he sent it out to, at that time, there were 13 publishers in New York, and he sent it out to 13 publishers, and he got 12 rejection letters, all of which he's kept, which I just love that because he will occasionally read me the rejection letters. And he said, "I'm going to make you lots and lots of money." And so I was so excited. So the one offer that he got was for $5,000. And I said, "Is $5,000 a lot of money? Because I can't possibly quit my job." And he's like, "Well, it's the only offer we've got. So we're going to go ahead and take it." And so we took the offer for $5,000. The Beach Club was published. It was picked as People Magazine's Book of the Week right when it came out. And I was so excited, but they had only printed 5,000 copies. And at this point, you have to remember, this is before the Kindle. This is before the Nook. This is before your iPhone. This is the year 2000. None of that exists. So they ran out of books. It was really frustrating. But the book did well for a first novel. And I was offered another 2-book deal. And my second novel, Nantucket Nights, came out, and it didn't get the publicity, and it didn't do well. And then my third novel did even worse. And despite that, they gave me another 2-book deal for The Blue Bistro and The Love Season. And The Blue Bistro, even to this day, if you ask a room full of Elin Hilderbrand fans what is their favorite novel, they will tell you it is The Blue Bistro. It's one of my most beloved books. But at the time, it sold terribly. It sold 4,000 copies in hardback, which is just awful. And I was really depressed and felt dejected and wondered, like, do I even want to be a writer? And then when The Love Season came out, I took a leap and I hired my own publicist. And again, I got the People magazine with the picture and the 4 stars. I was so excited. And again, my publisher ran out of books. over the course of the summer. And I was, again, you can't get it on your Kindle. So it was very discouraging. And at that point, I decided to switch publishers. So a little bit of inside information about the publishing world. You can really only switch publishers once. People do it more often, but I feel like you get one chance. You can switch publishers, and you'd better pick correctly, because to do it more than that, then it starts looking a little wonky. So my agent advised me very well and said, listen, we're going to leave publisher A. We're going to move around. I went to New York City and I met with 10 publishers, and they all wanted to publish my novel Barefoot. And I ended up switching to Little Brown Hachette, who has turned my last 20 novels into New York Times bestsellers. And they did that not because the books are any better than my first 5 books, but just because they put in the time and the attention and the marketing. And that's when you started to see the covers and the font and the Elin Hilderbrand look. And they sort of created, they turned me into like a beach book writer, and they did such a beautiful job. Now, that was a very long way of answering your question. So one of the things we did after I was established, was this idea of having a cool second job. And the cool second job was writing a series that came out in the winter. And I have to say, I really feel like this business plan worked, because my summer novels are all standalones. So you can read them in any order, but they're all separate stories. Whereas the series, people really like it. They really like to read a series where the characters keep coming back. And so first I did the Christmas series, and then I did the Caribbean series. And those, I think, have fostered interest then in my summer books. And so everything is from a business perspective going very well.
Thank you for that. I just think it's always interesting, and people have different stories, obviously, about their trajectory as writers. But it's, we often have aspiring writers in our audiences. And as independent booksellers, one of the things we do is, we host writers who are just getting started. And we have a lot of people who spend time in the store when people are spending time in the store, who, are getting started, who are members of writing workshops and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And even booksellers, there are plenty of booksellers turned writer. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, I was going to tell this funny story. So last week I did an event with Nicholas Sparks, right? North Carolina's favorite son. Yeah. So I did an event with Nicholas Sparks, and I asked him, like, how did you get started? And you guys in the audience may know this. So he wrote his first book and got $1 million advance, and then sold the movie 3 days later. And I'm looking at him like, are you kidding me? Like that. And I said to the people watching, that never happens. And we are not going to assume that is how it's going to happen for you. Like, my first advance was $5,000. I couldn't quit my job. I had little kids. I didn't quit my job until between the second and third book were written. And even then, I was not rich and famous, and it was work. And so you should not expect to be Nicholas Sparks and sell your first novel for $1 million. You might, but you probably won't. So you should just plan on being a working writer.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because we don't want to give anyone the wrong impression about how it might go. And it is work, and it is work in addition to the writing, right? I mean, it's not just it's work in addition to the writing, for sure.
So on any given day, I was going to say, on any given day, like, I'm writing. So just so you guys know, like, I write everything longhand. So this is next summer's book. So in October is particularly busy for me because I have a book out. So I'm promoting Troubles in Paradise. Meanwhile, my main job is to write and finish writing the book that's coming out next summer. So that it's work. It is work. And I'm signing, copies all the time at the Independent here in Nantucket. And it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's, and what's the the comic book phrase is with great power becomes great responsibility. It's a little bit of a spin on that, right? So with great success comes then even more that you actually have to do, right? The more fans you have. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
all the more reason why we appreciate your time.
Yeah, social media is a job in and of itself. Like I do all my own social media. So I do my own Instagram. I would encourage you to follow my Instagram because it's like my fourth child. I give it that much attention, you know, and I have a cooking show that I do in my Instagram stories. And, you know, I love to post about other people's books, what I'm reading, what I'm enjoying. I do tours of Nantucket. Like this summer I did these flower tours. I mean, my Instagram is really like, I'm curating it like it's a museum, but it is my favorite, but it takes time, Stephanie. I mean, it's like, you know, an hour here, an hour there. It adds up.
It adds up. Yeah. And you also have a life, family, right. So fans, thank Elin for putting all that time into staying in touch on Instagram as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the writing and about your process. So we've seen that you write in longhand and legal pads. Give us a glimpse of your sort of writing day, or what you're, you know, if you have a regular schedule, like how all of that shakes out, and then maybe a little bit about sort of the life of the book, you know, because of course there's writing and then editing. And, yeah.
Exactly. So on a macro scale, so I will normally start the winter book on January 1st and it's due at the end of April. So I have 4 months to write that book. And then May 1st, I start writing the summer book, and that's due on Halloween. So that's why October is tough for me, because I just finished my first draft 2 days ago. I'm putting it into the computer. Then I will print it out, edit it, probably do that twice before I send it to my editor. Then I send it to my editor on Halloween. She will get back to me with many things that she wants me to change. And I take 6 weeks. I go to Boston by myself. Again, this is something I did to sort of buffer myself from my children because they take up so much time. I go to Boston by myself for 6 weeks and I do the revisions. And the revisions are really where the magic happens, because I already have the characters. I already basically have the plot, and it's just really bringing out the color, bringing out, like, making sure that all the plot is perfect, making sure the pacing is perfect. It's where it's where the book really becomes good, is when I'm doing the revising, and that's with the help of my editor. And then it's always due at Christmas. My Christmases are miserable because I've been working, like right up until December 23rd. I've never gotten a Christmas card out. My ex-husband does the Christmas cards, and I mean, I should just sign my name to his card, because I just have never gotten a card out. And then I start writing the winter book January 1st. So it's exhausting. In a day, the way I set up my day writing wise is, and this will maybe not make sense, but I exercise for 3 hours. So I go running, I do my Peloton bike, and then I go to bar class. And that whole process takes 3 hours. And I do it every single day, no matter what. And the reason for that is a discipline that then sets up my writing day. So I'll normally start writing around 11:30. And in a perfect world, I write until 6. And in the 6 or 7 hours that I give myself, I'm also reading. I'm also editing. I have lunch. I take a nap. If I'm working out back by my pool, I go for a swim. So I break it up, but I try and get 3 hours of composing done. And if you compose 3 hours a day, 360 days a year, you can write 2 books.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So yeah, that amount of discipline is remarkable. And it shows, right? And just being able to keep on a schedule is its own kind of feat, right, in terms of the publishing world, but then also be able to produce books that are consistently good and keep people wanting more. You know, we've had more questions about just people anticipating when the next book will come out, for instance. So, and you've answered that question talking about that as well. So it's great. Thank you for giving us that glimpse into kind of how the magic happens. But it's not magic, it's hard work. There's no magic wand. Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into questions from the audience. Yeah. And I'm sure you get this question a lot, but it's definitely worth asking and answering. The Winter and the Paradise series seem to be quote unquote made for TV / made for Hollywood movies. Any chance that either or both of these series will be made into a visual art?
So in general, so I've written, so I can't even remember, Stephanie, this is number 26, I think. Is this number 26? I think
I was actually going to ask you, I had 26 in my head, but I wanted to confirm with you.
I think it is 26.
Yeah.
And so so Hollywood has been a very cruel mistress. I had 3 books. I went to Hollywood 2 years ago in September of 18. I went to Hollywood. I met with all the studios. At that point, I was pitching my novel, The Identicals, and Identicals was being mixed in with The Matchmaker and The Blue Bistro. They were going to do a series where the 3 books were sort of put together, but The Identicals was the lead. Okay, so Hulu bought it. I was so excited. We had a script written by the Jacques Matons, who wrote Mad Men. Fantastic. Amblin, Steven Spielberg's company, was producing. I mean, you could not ask for a more pedigreed show than this show. And Hulu, we went through the script for an entire year, and Hulu eventually passed. Broke my heart. This was last December. I was devastated. In the meantime, Fox had optioned my novel, The Perfect Couple. And again, we had a great script, and that was really looking like it was going to get made. It gets to Fox, the script gets to Fox. Fox has a Lee Daniels project that is set on the vineyard. It's too close in nature. They go with the Lee Daniels project. So then that doesn't get made. So then I'm just thinking, this is so awful. At this point, 28 Summers has been optioned for film. I mean, I'm not even going to say it's going to get made because who knows, but it has been optioned for film. Summer of '69 has been optioned by Sony Pictures for film. The Perfect Couple is still alive somewhere. We'll wait and see. It is, that script is still alive. The Paradise series has been optioned by ABC with Ellen Pompeo producing. I can only hope. I don't even know what to say. Like, I can just tell you that, and that is actually something that's happened, but I can't even predict. And then the Christmas Winter Street series has a producer, which is Perry Gilpin, who played Roz on Frasier. She and the producers, Suzanne Todd, are pitching the Christmas series. They're out pitching it now, or they will be pitching it soon. So, fingers crossed on that. But everything is like in various states of tentativeness. I certainly, and that's like really an inside scoop exclusive to Malaprops, because I couldn't even tell you like what I think will get made, what won't get made. Hollywood is so complicated. And of course, now there's a pandemic. So it's unclear like what the status of the studios are. We'll see. We can hope. And if anybody out there knows someone in La La Land, just put in a good word.
Yeah, if anybody has those contacts. And I'll say something to the folks in the audience that I know which is this is not an uncommon story. To have books out there that are optioned and were made in limbo for some time, especially when you have a popular series. That happens, quite a lot. And it is frustrating for authors and fans as well. But at least there are enough potential projects out there that, it increases the odds that something will come to fruition, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I have 6, so 1 6. Yeah, hopefully.
Right. I mean, just the percentages are in your favor, I would think. Have a little bit more specific question about the Paradise series. What was the inspiration behind having Irene and Russ in Iowa City? And I don't know if that's too specific for people who might not have gotten into the series, or I mean, it's an inspiration question.
One of the things, it it kind of ties into the earlier question about the business of these books. So and for those of you who've read my summer books, the characters in those books, if they don't live on Nantucket all the time, they normally live somewhere on the East Coast, just because that's where I've been. That's where I've sort of traveled, and that's where I've lived. And I was in Baltimore, and I was in, I spent some time at Duke actually, but I was mostly on the East Coast. And when I started writing the Paradise series, the sales team at Hachette emailed me and said, is there any way you could have some characters that come from the Midwest? Because the Midwest would really like to be represented, and this is a perfect opportunity. And I felt like it was really organic, because when I go down to the Caribbean, it's a lot of people from Kansas and South Dakota and Canada. I mean, it's not by any means just people from, Boston, New York, and Washington. I mean, there is a lot of diversity from the United States down in the Virgin Islands. So I thought, okay, perfect. Then I had to figure out, like, where have I ever lived in the Midwest? And I've only lived one place, which is in Iowa City. So I thought, okay, fine. She can be from Iowa City, and I lived there for 2 full years, and I can write with authority about Iowa City, which I did. And then the sons are from Denver and Houston. And I picked those cities because when I go on tour, they were cities that I've spent a bunch of time in when I've done my book tours. So I thought, oh, and they're like fun, cool cities. So I used Denver and Houston as well. But that was a business decision that sort of then wove itself into the fabric of the novels.
Yeah, interesting. And then considering that you mentioned not having the greatest experience in Iowa when you first arrived, it's sort of nice that that ended up feeding into your ability to get that novel together in a way that worked for everybody. So yeah, excellent. We actually had someone else who asked about movies or TV series. People really want to watch. You know this already. Yeah. So a complete aside, and I hope this is okay with you. I actually appreciate the questions that are just about something completely different. Kelly's saying that she met you a few years ago at your bucket list weekend. And it was really fun, and was thinking, have you ever thought of putting together a list of all your favorite restaurants in Nantucket? Like, you could do your own sort of food guide.
Right. One of the things that I'd love to do, I don't have time, but one of the things I'd love to do is to get 2 guidebooks, slender guidebooks, like the Elin Hilderbrand Guide to Nantucket, that would have maps and pictures and recipes and my suggestions, like different itineraries and the places that I like to go and I like to hang out. Not only restaurants, but, where do I shop? Where, the Bartlett Farm and this brewery and the places that I go. And then I'd love to do that for St. John as well. And there's hiking, like there are a lot of tours on my Instagram of like different hikes that I took in St. John, different beaches. So I would love to get those guidebooks up. Because those guidebooks don't exist, the only thing I can tell you is that the Boston Globe in May of 2018 did a long article called Elin Hilderbrand's Nantucket, and you can Google that article, and it has a list of my favorite restaurants, my favorite shopping, my favorite beaches, my favorite exercise places. Like, they're all in that article with the Boston Globe. But I would love to do a guidebook, obviously, when I get some time.
Well, we'll look forward to that. Look forward to you having the time, and then getting to that perhaps. Patricia has been posting links to like your Instagram and to your books, and she is really excellent, and we'll I'm sure put a link into the article from the Boston Globe as well. So y'all can check out the chat and go ahead and copy and paste that so you have that. And so what you just said actually led quite well into another question that we have, which is, do you think the popularity of the Paradise series will increase tourism in St. John? Or do you know if it's had an effect?
That is a great question. So one of the things that made me actually nervous about writing the Paradise series is, you know, I do not live there. I do not own property there. I don't really have any claim to writing about it. And so I was nervous that when I wrote it, that people were going to be like, okay, you have sort of co-opted our island for your own profit, right? Which would be something that they could say. I am here to tell you that because of the timing, so the first book came out in October of 18, and it was a scant year after the hurricanes, and it brought so much tourism, and everybody on that island was so grateful. I do not pay for a meal. I mean, everyone was like, thank you. No one has ever written about us before. We feel honored. You did such a good job. Like, I used real restaurants and real places and real businesses, and people felt like I did an authentic job, and I felt very gratified and very humbled by the fact that I have their endorsement. And it has really, I mean, I don't know how much I moved the needle on tourism, but every single person that owns a business has had at least one person come and say, oh, I'm here because I read the Paradise books. And so that's exciting to me. And I feel good about it. And I feel that like the timing was fortuitous, because I hit when their economy was at its bottom, which was after the hurricanes and everything was destroyed and closed and whatever. And really, when I went back in 18, just a mess, the place was a mess, that I was able, right at the time when they were reemerging, to bring this book to the world, and then the subsequent 2 books, so that now I really feel like St. John is back. And the interesting thing about St. John is that I was there during the pandemic. So I flew down on March 11th, at which point everything was still sort of okay. And I had been there less than a week, and everything at home like went up in flames. And I thought, okay, what's going to happen? So I had a week on St. John, and then all the restaurants closed and the businesses closed. And for 2 weeks, the beaches were closed and the trails were closed. So it got really, really limited, but I still had a wonderful, I ended up staying 2 extra weeks. So I sheltered in Paradise for 7 weeks, and it was quite an experience.
Yeah. I imagine there would be worse places to shelter.
Yeah. I wanted to add that because they had been through the hurricanes, the island did much better with the pandemic than other people in other parts of the country, because they had lived there for months without electricity, without water. And so the fact that the beaches were closed was like no big deal. Like the fact that the businesses were closed was no big deal, because they had already been through, like, their coping muscles were toned. You know what I mean? They had already dealt with a major disaster.
And I suspect that the folks there probably already had stronger coping muscles than a great many other people to begin with. I mean, that's sort of life, on an island, I think, to a large degree, right? So do you have any, I'm now just curious about maybe any relationships you'd like to mention that you've developed in St. John. Because I mean, it sounds like, people know you when you walk into businesses. You had mentioned previously that, one of the things it has in common with Nantucket is you don't have like chain stores and that sort of thing, which,
right.
and knowing, as an independent bookstore, one of the things we're really focused on is the sustainability of actual, small businesses run by people who live and work in their communities, and and give back to those spaces. And obviously you have developed a real connection to both of your adopted homes, right? To Nantucket and to St. John. And I'm particularly interested in any relationship you'd like to speak to, or maybe any surprises, or anecdotes you're interested in sharing.
Well, I think it was like my fourth year, I think, when I was down there, that I met a couple, and then they have 4 kids. And they just became my best friends. And once you have like actual friends in a place, it really becomes home. And after I think I became friends with this family, the Lasotas, once I became friends with them, you know, St. John started feeling like home, and that's when I decided I wanted to write the books.
Mm.
And when you meet one set of local friends, then others follow. So then they introduce you to people. And then, you know, by my 5th year, you know, we would go out on Friday nights, and we had like our little rituals, and we would go out on Friday nights, and all these people would come. And then there was a birthday party one year. I think it was 2017. There was a birthday party for a local guy. And then we got invited. How this happened, I have no idea, but like we were on a boat, like a party boat with all these locals, like the people that own the businesses. And I'm like, this is so great. Like, that's when you feel like you're vacationing in the right place. And I see it from the other side in Nantucket, because I have lots of friends who come to Nantucket only in the summer, and I only see them for like 1 week in the summer, because that's when they're renting. And they really, you know, cherish the connection that they have with local people. So also I want to say, like, my favorite restaurant on St. John is La Tapa, and that's the restaurant that's featured in this series. And, you know, the chef owner is a woman, and she's amazing. And, you know, she is grateful, and she hears, you know, from all of her patrons, like, all about these books. And, you know, she's of course thrilled. I mean, thrilled. And so I really try to spread around, like, over the 3 books, like all of the places that I patronize. Like, I try and have a scene at every single one, so that nobody feels, you know, left out.
Yeah, I imagine that's actually a little bit of a challenge. You don't want anyone feeling snubbed, but but it looks like you're doing a great job, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do with your art. You know, to be able to invite other people in, essentially, and kind of spread the love that way. So I have another more specific book question from someone who just finished Troubles, and loved it as always, and wants to know if you have an Irene in your life.
So I don't. I did want to tell this story. So the way I came up with Irene is I had a letter sent to my house from a reader in Toronto. How this woman got my home address, I do not know. That is mystery 1. Okay. Yeah. I don't always have time to open my mail. I have birthday cards. I turned 51 on July 17th. I still have birthday cards I have not opened. Okay. But for whatever reason, I opened this letter from this woman in Toronto, and the letter said, my husband has been having an affair I just found out that my husband has been having an affair for 12 years. And then she says, women in their 50s should be in the CIA because we are invisible. Nobody sees us. Mm. And at that point, I was probably 46 or 47. And I rejected this idea. I thought, oh no. But it stuck with me. And I thought, okay, at a certain point, women begin to feel invisible, and it's at some point in their 50s. And I thought, I am going to write a novel about a woman in her 50s who is starting to feel invisible and who rejects it and and really, like, comes into her own in her 50s. And so that is where I got the inspiration for Irene, because she is the true hero in that trilogy. And she turns 58, and I love every second of the fact that she is, you know, a middle-aged woman who is having a love story, having a reinvention, and having a second act.
Yeah. And that's a great story to tell. And one that I think probably isn't told enough. And that idea that there is this invisibility that, you know, that feels like it's setting in. I know I've had that conversation with friends, you know, even stories of, you know, being physically sort of, you know, in a space just looked right past, right? That I feel like there's a lot of people who can identify with that, even if it's not something quite as intense as, you know, the situation that you received a letter about, or the situation in the book, you know, just the sort of day-to-day kind of, like, you know, just sort of, you know, being in a space and feeling like you're not existing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I had another process question, and you did talk a lot about, and thank you again about the writing, but the specific question about whether or not you have your plot planned out ahead of time. We don't think we got specifically to the like pantsing or plotting question. If you're writing, yeah, and so from someone else who I think is looking at writing.
So I do not plan it out. I basically, when I start a novel, I will start with 3 or 4 pages of character ideas and just sort of thinking about a character. And then I dive into a scene. Now, I don't know what's going to happen at the end. So I'm writing a novel now, and I've spent every day since the beginning of April with the people on this page. And so I know them better now than I did in April. There is no way you can understand your character in full without writing the book first. That's why the revising is so important, because once you have the book and you know who the characters are, then you can go back in and say, oh, well, my character would or would not do this. But it really evolves organically for me, just as I'm writing it, and if I get stuck. So a lot of people ask what happens when you get stuck. I always go back to the beginning and I sort of remember, because I'm not looking at the book. I mean, the book is 300 or 400 pages long. I can't remember what happened on page 40. So I go back and I read the whole thing through again, and you get ideas and threads that you wanted to pick up on, and, oh, let's have this character come back. One of the things that people who've already finished Troubles in Paradise will notice is that one of the things I love to do in that series is a minor character in book 1 becomes a major character in book 3. I'm thinking of Tilda. She's mentioned on the first page, in the first heirs chapter in book 1, but we think nothing of it. And then she comes back and she's really a major player in book 3. And I like to bring back characters that have appeared. I use them because I put them in. I almost feel like I put them in for a reason, but I do not plot out my books. Another difference, so when I interviewed Nicholas Sparks last week, he is really like, you have to put the reveal on page 50, and you have to drop your clues in a very systematic way. And I just don't feel that way. I just feel like, I'm interested in the characters and how they interact, and then the surprise of how they sort of the plot develops out of their interaction.
Yeah. And I think that shows that there's no right answer, right? I mean, writers approach these things.
Everybody does.
Yeah.
Everybody does things differently. Yeah. Plot.
And someone else asked about whether or not, and I think your answer answers the question, asked about a similar question with the series, right? So when you're writing a trilogy, if you have a sense of the arc of the story, when you get started or not. Yeah.
I had some vague ideas of how I wanted it to. I knew what the basic things that were going to happen. And I knew sort of which love relationships were going to work out and which weren't, but some of them I didn't. So there's a real love triangle with the brothers and this girl. And I thought, who is she going to end up with? And I think it worked out the way it was supposed to. But I had, I was guessing, and then I feel like because I was guessing, maybe the readers were guessing, because I thought, I really am not sure. In book 1, I wasn't sure who Eris would end up with. It was going to be one of the brothers, probably, and not her jerky ex-boyfriend, but maybe her jerky ex-boyfriend. So, it's fun for me to dive in and figure out what happens, but I do not plot it out in advance, because I feel like that's me imposing a structure on something instead of letting it sort of develop in the day-to-day, which is what I like to do.
Yeah. And it sounds like something happens with you that I know happens with some other writers as well, which is that the characters speak to you to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Right. And so once you have the characters, they're going to kind of let you know what they wouldn't do and how things might go. Yeah.
I think that's how
I always appreciate hearing that when authors keep themselves guessing a little bit as they write.
Yeah.
I think that Yeah, I think that then comes out, you know, in the book, and then that's one of the things that people, you know, keeps people along for the ride, especially through a series. And obviously without any spoilers, if you can answer why you chose the ending to the series that you did. Not, you know, if there's a way to answer without giving away what that is, obviously.
I'll say one thing. So there was a point, and those of you who've read it will know, there's a point about 3/4 of the way through the book where I could have had a book 4. I thought, oh, I could do this and I'd have a book 4. And I very much did not want to write a book 4. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. If it gets made into a series, they can do it. I've already talked to the people writing the script. I'm like, if you want to get to this point and then you take it a different direction and we can do, you know, go that way in the series. But I really wanted to end it at the end of book 3. And so I chose to do that the way I did. But I mean, I definitely think there's room if it gets into development and television where it could go on longer than the books do.
So if a TV writer picks it up, then there could be more to come.
Yeah,
for sure. So I just realized that it is almost 7 o'clock. The time has really flown. Thank you so much.
Can I do my book recommendation?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. So folks, if you'll hang out for a couple extra minutes, Ellen is going to recommend a couple of books to us. Some of you have asked about that anyway, and I'm sorry that we couldn't get to more questions. Thank you so much for all of your amazing questions and comments and the love that you've been showing to Ellen this evening. So yes, what would you like to recommend that we read?
Okay, so I have 2 books for you. And so the first novel that I'm going to recommend is called Luster by Raven Leilani. And the premise of this book, it's her first novel. It is about a young urban Black woman living in New York who has an online affair with a white guy who lives in the suburbs in New Jersey. And he's in an open marriage, and things take off and just get so interesting and so complicated. It is gorgeously written. Raven Leilani is going to be a superstar. You heard me say it first. This book is so worth reading. One of my top 2 books of the year. Okay, let me rave some more. This book, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, it is absolutely incredible. So the people at my independent bookstore here in Nantucket recommended it to me. I dismissed them. It's about Shakespeare's son. It's set in Elizabethan times in the late 1500s during the bubonic plague. I had zero interest in reading it. I do not like historical fiction. I do not like Shakespeare. I'm like, I'm not reading it. And for whatever reason, somebody said something. I think what they said is just read it because the writing is so beautiful. Ellen, just read it. So I picked it up on Friday. It is absolutely incredible. It is so well written. You get completely sucked into the story. It doesn't matter that I don't like Shakespeare. It doesn't matter that I don't like historical fiction. It is absolutely, you must read this book. I don't know what else to tell you. It's Hamnet. Hamnet was the name of Shakespeare's son who died from the bubonic plague. And he then later wrote the play Hamlet because Hamnet and Hamlet were interchangeable names back then. And I'm pretty sure that Maggie O'Farrell did not want to write a novel called Hamlet. So it's Hamnet. I literally thought it sounded like the name of a sandwich. I did not want to read it. It is fantastic. Number 1 recommendation, and Luster.
Excellent, thank you. And Patricia put those in the chat, so go ahead and click on the chat, and you can link to more information on those from Malaprops, and that's wonderful. And of course, I'd love to hear that that you're getting recommendations from your indie, because that's one of the things we love to do. And right now, and of course we do it when folks are in the store, but right now we'll do it, on, we have limited hours, we can check our website. We'll do it on the phone. There's a button on our website where you can kind of get a sort of concierge kind of service as well. So that's just our favorite, just putting books in people's hands person to person. And you got to read Hamnet out of it, something that sounds like you would have never picked up otherwise. Yeah.
So happy. So worth it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen. I can't believe how the time has flown, and it's just been delightful. We're so happy to finally see you, even though we weren't able to do it in person. Thank you for joining us virtually here in Asheville. We really appreciate it. Yeah. And I will leave the last word to you.
Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you to all my North Carolina and beyond readers. I really intend to make it to Asheville in person in June. My novel is called Golden Girl. It comes out June 1st, which I feel like is a beautiful time to come to Asheville. And I really want to say, I don't care if you take your cart back to the front of the grocery store. I don't care if you buy tomatoes out of season. You really should buy your books from independent bookstores, because they are the backbone of our civilization. And so please support Malaprops, support your local independent wherever you live. And thank you so much for reading. And thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's been a real delight. We so appreciate it. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Fingers crossed that we can get together next year again and do this again, maybe in the same space. All right. Good night. Everyone have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it.